You're nothing but an embarrassment. You're not welcome in this house. My daughter sneered at me during her grand party. I smiled calmly and handed the lawyer a thick file. It's your move now, I whispered. And just like that, her confident smile vanished. You're embarrassing me in front of my real family. Imagine your own daughter at her engagement party, looking you dead in the eye and spitting out those words. It wasn't just a slight, it was a dagger. My daughter Emma had just inherited $33 million, and in her new world, her construction worker father was suddenly a liability. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd been hiding the truth about who I really was for 25 years. And her inheritance, it came with conditions she had just publicly, spectacularly, violated. Her next sentence wasn't just going to destroy her life, it was going to vanish her millions. I remember adjusting my worn work boots, a quiet, almost sad smile playing on my lips, watching her unravel her entire future right before my eyes. Emma thought she understood money, she thought she understood power. But she was about to learn a brutal lesson, the profound difference between inherited wealth and earned respect. This story, you see, it really begins 25 years ago with a choice I made that would change everything. A choice that ultimately led to a $33 million inheritance disappearing in just 72 hours. My name is Jake Williams. For the past 5 years, my daughter Emma had been treating me like a second-class citizen in my own family, and it started subtly. 3 years ago, at her own wedding, she actually seated me with the catering staff. Not at the family table, but next to the servers. When I asked her why, a tight knot forming in my stomach, she just said, "Dad, you'll be more comfortable with people who understand your situation." My situation? I'm a construction foreman. I drive a 2018 Ford F-150 with 250,000 miles on it. My Red Wings steel-toed boots cost $350, though Emma never bothered to notice the price tag. To her, I was just the guy who showed up to family events with dirt under his fingernails. The pattern, the dismissiveness, got worse after she married Bradley Sterling last year. Bradley comes from old Beverly Hills money. His family owns a chain of luxury hotels. I still remember Christmas dinner, the way Emma actually apologized to Bradley's parents for my rough hands when I passed the wine. She said, and I quote, "Dad spent his whole life working with concrete. It shows." A cold, sharp stab to the heart, right there at the dinner table. Emma's mother, Rebecca, my wife, died 6 years ago. She left behind what I thought was a modest life insurance policy. Turns out, Rebecca had family money I never knew about. Old money. The kind that comes with layers of lawyers, complex trust funds, and very, very specific rules. Last year, when Emma turned 28, she inherited $33 million. $28 million in a trust fund, plus $5 million in immediate cash. Overnight, my daughter went from comfortably middle class to a multimillionaire. And that's when everything accelerated. That's when she bought the $2.8 million Beverly Hills penthouse. That's when she started shopping at stores where a single dress costs more than most people's cars. And that's when she apparently decided her construction worker father was an embarrassing liability to her new image, her new life. But here's the kicker. The inheritance came with requirements. Legal requirements. Emma had to donate $500,000 annually to charity. And crucially, she had to maintain what the legal documents called respectful relationships with surviving family members. She also had to submit annual reports proving both conditions were met. Emma, of course, fixated on the money, the flashy figures. She completely ignored the fine print. Just last month, she joined the ultra-exclusive Beverly Hills Country Club. Membership fee, $50,000 annually. She wanted to network with her kind of people, her words, not mine. That's where she met the Ashworth family, Richard, who owns an $800 million private equity firm, Caroline, his wife, who chairs 3 different charity boards, and their son, Marcus, a recent Harvard Business School grad. Emma was absolutely desperate to impress them, and apparently, having a father who showed up and worked close wasn't part of that plan. The breaking point arrived 2 weeks before her engagement party. Emma invited me to lunch at the country club. My heart, ever hopeful, thought maybe, just maybe, this was an attempt to repair our fractured relationship. Instead, she slid a business card across the table. It was for an image consultant. Dad, she began, not quite meeting my eyes. I need you to understand something. My life has changed. The people I associate with now, they have certain expectations. I looked at the card. Sarah Mitchell, image consultant to Beverly Hills Elite, $500 per session. My blood ran cold. What exactly are you asking me to do, Emma? I asked, my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside. I'm asking you to get some help. Learn how to dress appropriately. Maybe take a class on social etiquette. You could even say you're retired instead of what you actually do. I slowly handed the card back. I'm proud of what I do, Emma. Her response was immediate, chillingly casual. Well, I'm not. She didn't hesitate. I've worked too hard to build this new life to have it undermined by someone who doesn't understand the rules. The rules, as if respect or value was something you could buy at Nordstrom. I should have walked away right then. But I made one last, desperate attempt. Emma, I've been your father for 29 years. Doesn't that count for something? She glanced around the opulent country club dining room, making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned forward, her voice a harsh whisper. Not anymore, Dad. Not in my world. That conversation, September 1st, was exactly 13 days before her engagement party. The party where everything changed. Let me tell you what I stood to lose if I'd stayed silent. First, my relationship with my only child. Emma and I weren't close anymore, but she was still my daughter. I'd raised her alone after Rebecca died, taught her to ride a bike, helped with homework every night for 12 years, walked her down the aisle at her wedding. All of that history, all those memories, were about to be erased because I didn't fit her new lifestyle. Second, my reputation. Word travels fast in Beverly Hills. If Emma continued telling people I was an embarrassment, it wouldn't just affect family dinners. It would affect my work relationships, my friendships, my standing in the community. But the biggest loss, my self-respect. I'd spent 25 years building something I was incredibly proud of. I wasn't about to let anyone, even my own daughter, tear that down without consequences. Here's what Emma didn't know about her inheritance. The money came from Rebecca's grandmother, Elizabeth Morrison. Elizabeth was old Philadelphia money, the kind of family that built their fortune in the 1800s and never forgot their values. Elizabeth lived through the Great Depression. She understood, truly understood, the difference between mere money and true character. So, when Elizabeth drafted her will in 2010, she included very specific language about family loyalty. Section 7, Clause 2 of the inheritance documents, stated that beneficiaries must maintain respectful and supportive relationships with all surviving family members to retain access to funds. Section 12, Clause 4 was even more specific. Any public disrespect, humiliation, or rejection of family members will result in immediate review and potential revocation of benefits. Margaret Davis, Rebecca's family attorney, had explained these exact conditions to Emma when she inherited. Margaret made sure Emma understood that the money wasn't just a gift, it was a profound responsibility. Emma signed the documents. She agreed to the terms. Then, she promptly forgot about them, swept away by the glamour of her new wealth. What Emma also didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. Every subtle insult, every public humiliation, every painful moment she chose her new social status over basic human decency. I had text messages where she told her friends I was just a construction worker who didn't understand sophisticated people. I had photos from events where she literally introduced me to people as the help. And I had a voice recording from our country club conversation where she said she wasn't proud of what I do. Margaret Davis had given me her business card at Rebecca's funeral 6 years ago. She'd said, "Jake, if you ever need anything, call me. Rebecca always spoke highly of you." I kept that card in my wallet for 6 years, never once needing to use it. But after that soul-crushing country club lunch, I finally made the call. "Margaret, this is Jake Williams, Rebecca's husband." "Jake, how are you? How's Emma adjusting to the inheritance?" "That's actually why I'm calling," I said, my voice heavy with a decision I never wanted to make. "I think we need to talk." Margaret reviewed the meticulous documentation I'd gathered. Text messages, photos, audio recordings. It was a clear, undeniable pattern of behavior spanning 5 years, escalating dramatically since Emma had inherited. Jake, I have to ask, Margaret said, her expression serious. Do you want to pursue this? Because once we start the review process, there's no going back. If the inheritance committee finds that Emma violated the family respect clauses, she loses everything. All 33 million. I thought about Emma at age 5, crying because kids at school made fun of my work clothes on career day. I thought about how I taught her that what truly matters isn't what you wear or how much money you have, but how you treat people. Somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten that fundamental lesson. Margaret, I said, my resolve hardening. I don't want her money. I never have. But I won't be treated like I'm worthless because of how I make a living. Then we proceed, she confirmed. But Jake, Emma will get one final chance to comply with the inheritance terms. If she publicly acknowledges and respects your role in her life within 72 hours of notification, the committee will consider the matter resolved. One final chance. That seemed fair. What happened next would determine whether Emma kept her $33 million or lost everything because she valued status over her own family. The ultimate test would come at her engagement party. 200 guests from Beverly Hills society. The perfect, opulent stage for Emma to either repair our relationship or destroy it completely. I had no idea which choice she'd make, but I knew the consequences would be permanent. The engagement party was scheduled for September 14th, exactly 2 weeks away. Margaret prepared the legal paperwork. I pressed my best work shirt and polished my boots. Time to see what my daughter valued more, her inheritance or her integrity. The Beverly Hills Country Club sits on Wilshire Boulevard like a monument to old money. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of hushed quiet that only comes from wealth so established it doesn't need to make noise. Emma had reserved the main ballroom for her engagement party. 200 guests. A $50,000 budget. Everything had to be perfect for her grand debut into Beverly Hills society. I arrived at 6 p.m., wearing my best clothes, dark jeans, a crisp white button-down shirt, and my polished work boots. Not fancy, but clean, respectful. Emma met me at the entrance, a vision in a $12,000 Oscar de la Renta dress. Her smile was practiced, plastic. Her hug was cold, fleeting. Dad, you came. Of course I came. It's your engagement party. She looked me up and down, and I saw her jaw tighten just slightly. We need to talk before you meet anyone important. She guided me to a quiet corner near the bar, away from the arriving guests. Dad, I need you to understand something tonight. What's that? I asked, my voice calm, almost too calm. These people are potential business partners. Bradley's family has connections throughout Los Angeles. The Ashworths represent $800 million in investment capital. Congratulations, I said, a dry hint of sarcasm in my tone. What does that have to do with me? Emma glanced around nervously, making sure no one was listening. It has to do with how you present yourself, what you say, how you position your career. My career. My job, Dad. Maybe tonight you could say you're in business development or project management. Something that sounds more what? Professional, she finished for me. I kept my voice level, every word carefully chosen. I am a construction foreman. I manage projects worth millions of dollars. I supervise crews of 50 people. That is professional. That's not what these people will hear, she hissed. What will they hear, Emma? Her voice dropped to a whisper, laced with contempt. They'll hear blue collar, manual labor. Not our kind of people. Our kind of people, I echoed, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. You know what I mean, she insisted. And I did know what she meant. That was the problem. Before I could respond, a couple approached us. The man was tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The woman was elegantly dressed, adorned with the kind of jewelry that comes from generations of wealth. Emma, darling! The woman air-kissed both of Emma's cheeks. The party looks absolutely divine. Caroline, Richard, I'm so glad you could make it. Emma's voice changed completely, higher, more affected. I'd like you to meet my father. I extended my hand. Jake Williams. Nice to meet you. Richard Ashworth shook my hand with the grip of someone who'd clearly never done a day of manual labor in his life. Richard Ashworth. And what line of work are you in, Jake? This was Emma's moment. Her chance. Her final chance to either respect who I was or continue the pattern of public embarrassment. She hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then, she launched into her performance. Dad's in development. Project development. Not construction development. Richard nodded approvingly. Excellent. What kind of development? Commercial? Residential? Emma jumped in before I could answer, a desperate gleam in her eyes. Dad works on large-scale projects. Very complex, lots of moving parts. Technically true, but completely misleading. Fascinating, Caroline said, her gaze flicking between us. We're always looking for qualified development partners. Perhaps we should schedule lunch sometime. I looked at Emma. She was smiling, pleased with herself, believing she'd navigated the conversation successfully. Actually, I said, a quiet fire igniting within me. I should clarify something. Emma's eyes went wide, a silent, panicked plea. Dad, I'm not in development. I'm a construction foreman. I supervise building projects. The temperature in our little circle dropped 10 degrees. Richard's initial firm handshake had become polite but distant. I see. Well, that's honest work. Caroline nodded with the kind of forced enthusiasm people use when discussing other people's medical procedures. How nice. Manual labor is so important. They excused themselves within 60 seconds, melting back into the crowd. Emma waited until they were safely out of earshot. Then she grabbed my arm, her grip tight, angry. What was that? That was honesty, I replied, my voice calm, cutting through her fury. That was sabotage, she hissed. No, Emma, that was me refusing to lie about who I am. Do you have any idea what you just did? Richard Ashworth could open doors for Bradley's business. Caroline chairs the Children's Hospital Board. They donate millions every year. And they can't do that if they know I pour concrete for a living. They can't do that if they think we're not sophisticated enough for their circles. We're family, Dad. When you embarrass yourself, you embarrass all of us. Something shifted inside me then. A line, irrevocably crossed. Emma, let me ask you something. I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. When did I become an embarrassment? Dad, please don't make this difficult. When, exactly, did the man who raised you become someone you're ashamed of? I'm not ashamed. Then what are you? She looked around the ballroom at the crystal and marble, at the carefully dressed people sipping champagne. I'm trying to build something here. A life, a reputation, connections that matter. And you don't fit into that. Not the way you present yourself. The way I present myself, or the way I actually am. Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me. Dad, we can talk about this later. I need to greet more guests. No, I said, my voice firm, final. We can't talk about this later. We're talking about it now. Dad, please. Not here. Where then? At another lunch where you hand me business cards for image consultants. At another family dinner where you apologize for my rough hands. People were starting to notice. Emma's perfect party was developing a crack. You're being dramatic, she whispered fiercely. I'm being honest, I countered. Something you seem to have trouble with lately. Emma's voice got sharp, loud enough for a few nearby guests to turn their heads. Fine. You want honesty. Here's honesty. I've worked hard to get where I am. I'm not going to let anyone, including you, drag me down. Drag you down. Make me look less than what I've become. And there it was. The raw, ugly truth she'd been dancing around for months. I wasn't her father anymore. I was a liability. The party continued around us, a symphony of polite chatter and clinking glasses. But for us, something had irrevocably changed. Emma kept glancing at me like I was a bomb that might explode at any moment. I excused myself to get some air on the terrace. That's when my phone rang. Mr. Williams, this is Jennifer from the office. Sorry to call during your family event. I lowered my voice, stepping further into the cool night air. What's going on, Jennifer? The Denver project team needs approval for the overtime schedules, and the board meeting for next Tuesday has been moved to Thursday morning. Should I confirm your attendance? Yes, confirm for Thursday, and approve the Denver overtime. We're behind schedule. Perfect. Also, Forbes called about the interview for next month's construction industry feature. Should I schedule it? I glanced back through the ballroom windows. Emma was laughing with a group of women, her crisis from 5 minutes ago apparently forgotten. Schedule it for the week after next. And Jennifer! Yes, sir. Make sure they spell the company name correctly this time. Wilson Construction Group, not Williams. Absolutely. Have a good evening, Mr. Williams. I hung up, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me, and turned around. Emma was standing directly behind me. Who was that? Work, I said simply. Work calls you at night, on weekends sometimes. Emma frowned, confusion etched across her face. What kind of construction foreman gets calls from Forbes? The kind who has responsibilities you don't understand. Try me, she challenged, a hint of disdain in her voice. I almost told her then. Almost explained that Wilson Construction Group employed 15,000 people across 12 states. Almost mentioned that we'd built half the infrastructure projects in downtown Los Angeles over the past decade. Instead, I just said, "It's complicated, Dad. You pour concrete. How complicated can it be?" Before I could answer, Bradley Sterling approached with another couple. Bradley was tall, handsome, with the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never worrying about money. "Jake, there you are. I want you to meet Harrison and Melissa Parker." Harrison was about my age, with silver hair and hands that, unlike Richard Ashworth's, were clearly calloused. A man who'd worked his way up in construction. "Jake Williams," I said, shaking his hand. "Pleasure's mine," he replied. "Bradley tells me you're in construction?" "That's right. What kind of projects do you work on?" Emma tensed beside me. "Here we go again. Infrastructure, mostly. Bridges, highways, commercial buildings. Large-scale projects." Harrison's eyes lit up. "No kidding. Which company?" "Wilson Construction Group." Harrison's entire expression changed. His polite interest transformed into genuine awe. "Wilson Construction? You work for Jake Wilson?" "I do. Man, that guy's a legend. Built that company from nothing into a $3 billion empire. I've been trying to get a meeting with Wilson's people for 2 years. Their reputation is incredible." Emma was staring at me now, a strange, dawning expression on her face. "Actually," Harrison continued, practically buzzing with excitement, "Wilson Construction just won the contract for the new convention center downtown. An $800 million project, biggest infrastructure contract in LA history." "I heard about that," Bradley interjected. "Wasn't there some controversy about the bidding process?" Harrison laughed. "Only because Wilson's bid was so much lower than everyone else's. Turns out they've got construction methods that are both faster and cheaper than their competitors. Revolutionary stuff. Jake Wilson's a genius." I stayed quiet, letting Harrison talk, letting the information sink in. "I heard Wilson started the company 25 years ago," Melissa Parker added. "Self-made billionaire. Forbes ranked him in the top 200 wealthiest Americans last year." Emma was looking at me like she'd never seen me before. "Dad," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "How long have you worked for Wilson Construction?" "A long time." "How long exactly?" Before I could answer, Margaret Davis appeared at my elbow. She was carrying a sleek leather briefcase and wearing the kind of steely expression lawyers get when they have important business to discuss. "Jake, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk." Emma looked between Margaret and me, confusion growing, turning to dawning dread on her face. "Dad, who is this?" "This is Margaret Davis, your mother's attorney." "I know who she is. Why is she here?" Margaret smiled politely. "I'm here about your inheritance, Emma. There are some matters we need to discuss." The blood drained from Emma's face. Margaret Davis had perfect timing. She always did. "Emma, perhaps we could find somewhere private to talk?" "No." Emma's voice was sharp, defiant. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here." We were standing on the terrace now, with the ballroom lights glittering behind us. A few other guests had wandered outside, drawn by the tension in our voices, but they were far enough away to give us a semblance of privacy. "Very well," Margaret said, opening her briefcase with a crisp snap. "Emma, I'm here because there have been some concerns raised about your compliance with the inheritance terms." "What concerns?" Emma scoffed, but her eyes darted nervously. "The family respect clauses. Specifically, Section 7, Clause 2, and Section 12, Clause 4. Emma looked completely confused. I don't understand. The clauses requiring you to maintain respectful relationships with surviving family members. I have respectful relationships. Margaret glanced at me, then back at Emma, her expression unwavering. Unfortunately, that's not what the evidence suggests. What evidence? Emma demanded, her voice rising. Documentation spanning the past 5 years, showing a clear pattern of public disrespect toward your father. Emma's face went white. Who provided this documentation? That's confidential. What matters is that the Inheritance Review Committee has serious concerns about your compliance. The what committee? The committee established by your great-grandmothers will to oversee inheritance compliance. 3 attorneys, 2 family advisors, and 1 independent mediator. Nobody told me about any committee. It's outlined in Section 15 of the documents you signed, Emma. The committee has the authority to review beneficiary behavior and, if necessary, revoke inheritance privileges. Emma looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Revoke? Complete forfeiture of funds? Both the trust and the cash disbursement? You can't do that. Actually, we can. And we will if the behavior continues. What behavior? I haven't done anything wrong. Margaret pulled out a thick manila folder. Would you like me to read some examples? Emma glanced around the terrace. More guests were wandering outside, drawn by the sheer drama unfolding, by the rising tension in our voices. Not here, she hissed. Then where, Emma? Because this conversation is happening tonight, whether you want it to or not. That's when Emma made her fatal mistake. Instead of finding a private place to talk, instead of listening to what Margaret had to say, instead of taking any ounce of responsibility for her actions, Emma decided to double down. You know what? Fine. Let's do this right here, because I'm tired of everyone acting like I'm the problem. She turned to face the growing crowd of guests who'd gathered on the terrace. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to share something with you all. Margaret tried to stop her, a desperate urgency in her voice. Emma, I strongly advise, I'm done being advised. I'm done being told how to live my life by people who don't understand what I've achieved. The entire terrace went quiet. Even the party sounds from inside the ballroom seemed to fade. My father thinks I should be grateful for his contributions to my life. My mother's attorney thinks I should follow rules written by dead people who never met me. She was spiraling now, her voice getting louder, more shrill, laced with fury. But here's what nobody seems to understand. I've built something here. I've created a life worth living. I've surrounded myself with people who understand success, who appreciate excellence, who know the difference between achievement and manual labor. The crowd was getting visibly uncomfortable. This wasn't cocktail party conversation anymore. My father wants respect, she cried, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet. Fine. I'll give him the respect he's earned. She turned to look directly at me, her eyes blazing with contempt. Dad, you're a construction worker. You've been a construction worker your entire life. You drive a beat-up truck. You wear work boots to formal events. And you have no idea how to conduct yourself in sophisticated company. The silence that followed was deafening. I appreciate that you raised me after Mom died. I really do. But that doesn't mean I have to spend the rest of my life apologizing for where I came from. Margaret was shaking her head slowly, a look of profound disappointment on her face. And if honoring some dusty inheritance clause means I have to pretend that pouring concrete is equivalent to building a real career, then maybe I don't want the inheritance at all. She looked around at the crowd of shocked faces. Actually, you know what? I don't need the inheritance. I've got Bradley. I've got my new life. I've got everything I actually want. So, if the committee wants to take their $33 million and give it to someone else, they can go right ahead. She turned back to me one final time, her voice dripping with venom. Dad, you're no longer welcome in my life. Not at my home. Not at my events. Not in my social circle. I'm done being embarrassed by you. The crowd stood frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Until Harrison Parker stepped forward. Emma, I think you should know something about your father. Harrison, don't, I started to say, a deep, primal part of me still wanting to protect her. Jake, she needs to hear this, he insisted. Harrison addressed the crowd, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what family drama we just witnessed, but I do know this. Jake Williams isn't just a construction worker. Emma rolled her eyes, a cynical laugh escaping her lips. Harrison, please don't try to make this. Jake Williams is Jake Wilson, Harrison declared, his voice booming. He's the founder and CEO of Wilson Construction Group. The silence that followed was absolute. Wilson Construction Group is a $3.2 billion company, Harrison continued, his voice filled with a powerful indignation. Jake employs 15,000 people. His company built half the infrastructure in Los Angeles, including the very building we're standing in right now. Emma's face went from white to an ashen gray, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. Jake Wilson is ranked number 191 on the Forbes billionaire list. His personal net worth is estimated at $2.1 billion. You could have heard a pin drop. Oh, and Emma, Harrison added, his voice dripping with righteous satisfaction, that $33 million inheritance you just rejected? Your father could buy and sell it 30 times over before lunch tomorrow. Harrison looked around at the stunned crowd, then back at Emma, his gaze piercing. So, when you say he's just a construction worker who doesn't understand sophisticated company, well, I think you might want to reconsider that assessment. Emma was staring at me like I was a stranger, her eyes searching for a lie, a way out. Dad, she whispered, her voice trembling. Is that true? I nodded slowly, a profound weariness settling over me. Every word. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded, tears welling in her eyes. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, Emma. Not what I have. Emma's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Margaret Davis cleared her throat, breaking the spell. Emma, in light of your public statements tonight, I'm afraid the Inheritance Committee has no choice but to proceed with immediate forfeiture proceedings. Wait, she gasped, her voice desperate. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises purchased with inheritance funds and return all assets to the estate. But I didn't know. Ignorance of your father's wealth doesn't excuse your behavior toward him, Margaret stated, her voice devoid of emotion. The inheritance terms were clear. Maintain respectful relationships with surviving family members. You've done the opposite, and you did it publicly, in front of witnesses. Margaret closed her briefcase, a final, definitive click. The committee will convene Monday morning. The forfeiture will be finalized by Wednesday. She handed Emma a business card. If you'd like to contest the decision, you can call my office. Though, given tonight's performance, I wouldn't recommend it. Margaret turned to me. Jake, the committee will need you to sign the transfer documents. Can you come by the office Thursday morning? I'll be there, I confirmed. Emma stood frozen as Margaret walked away. The crowd began to disperse, heading back inside to salvage what was left of the party. Finally, Emma found her voice. Dad, wait! We need to talk. I looked at her one last time, this person I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, standing in her $12,000 dress, surrounded by the Beverly Hills elite she'd worked so hard to impress. No, Emma, I said, my voice heavy with a finality that pierced the air. We really don't. I walked toward the parking garage, leaving my daughter standing alone on the terrace, having just lost $33 million because she was too proud to respect the man who raised her. Actions have consequences, even for inheritance money. The parking garage was quiet, except for the echo of my footsteps. I'd made it halfway to my truck when I heard Emma's heels clicking rapidly behind me. Dad, please wait! I stopped, but didn't turn around. Dad, I need to understand what just happened up there. Now I turned. Emma looked smaller somehow, despite the expensive dress and jewelry. The brittle confidence she'd worn like armor all evening had finally cracked. What do you need to understand, Emma? Are you really Jake Wilson, the billionaire? I'm Jake Williams. I've always been Jake Williams. Wilson is just the name I use for business. Why? When you're worth what I'm worth, people treat you differently. But Dad, you drive an old truck. You live in that tiny house in Pasadena. You wear work boots to formal events. Because that's who I am. The money doesn't change that. Emma shook her head, as if trying to wake up from a terrible dream. I don't understand. If you're worth billions, why do you live like what? Like a normal person? Like someone who doesn't have money, Emma? I've had money for 20 years. I've been the same person the entire time. The only thing that's changed is your perception. But the house! I own the entire block, Emma. I live in that house because it's where I raised you. Where your mother and I were happy. The truck! I own 17 vehicles. I drive the truck because I like it. It's practical. Emma leaned against a concrete pillar, looking as though she might faint. Dad, I've been... God. The things I've said to you. Yes, you have. I didn't know. That's the problem, Emma. You thought you knew everything about me, but you never bothered to ask questions. You made assumptions based on appearances. But why didn't you tell me? Why let me think you were struggling financially? I walked closer, keeping my voice gentle, but firm. When did I ever say I was struggling? You didn't have to say it. The house, the truck, the clothes. Emma, I've never complained about money. I've never asked you for money. I've never acted like money was a problem. But you live so modestly. And what's wrong with that? Emma didn't have an answer. Let me ask you something, I continued. If you'd known about the money 5 years ago, would you have treated me differently? Emma opened her mouth and closed it. Would you have been proud of me for what I'd built? Or would you have been proud of me for what I could buy you? Would you have introduced me as your father who worked hard and raised you well? Or as your father who could write checks for Bradley's business? Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears. I don't know. I do, I said, a profound sadness in my voice. You would have treated me exactly the same way you treated the inheritance. Like a thing to be displayed when convenient and hidden when embarrassing. Isn't that fair? That's not fair, isn't it? Tonight, when Harrison told everyone about Wilson Construction, what was your first emotion? Pride in my accomplishments or excitement about what it meant for your social status? Emma wiped her eyes, smearing her makeup. I was shocked. And after the shock wore off, she didn't answer, which was answer enough. Emma, for 25 years, I've built something I'm proud of. Not just the money, the company, the jobs, the infrastructure. I've employed thousands of people. I've built schools and hospitals and bridges. I've donated 500 million to charities. Emma stared at me, her jaws slack. 500 million? The children's hospital where you were born, the new wing that opened last year, I funded that anonymously. Why anonymously? Because charity isn't about recognition, Emma. It's about helping people. We stood in silence for a moment, the muffled sounds of the party continuing above us, a stark contrast to our shattered conversation. Dad, what happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. The inheritance, it's gone, Emma. Margaret wasn't bluffing. The committee will meet Monday, and by Wednesday, you'll have lost every penny. Can't you stop them? I won't stop them. Why not? Because actions have consequences. You spent 5 years treating me like garbage, culminating in tonight's performance. The inheritance terms were clear, and you violated them spectacularly. But I didn't know about your money. Emma, stop. The inheritance terms didn't say you had to respect me because I was wealthy. They said you had to respect me because I'm your father. Emma, slumped against the pillar, defeated. What am I going to do? What you should have done years ago. Figure out who you are without money defining you. The penthouse was purchased with inheritance money. You have 72 hours. Your engagement to Bradley, it might survive if it's based on love instead of financial convenience. Dad, please, can't we work something out? I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her. The expensive dress, the jewelry, the sheer desperation in her eyes as she realized her new life was built on sand. Emma, I've spent 25 years working to build something meaningful. You've spent the last 5 years tearing down the most important relationship in your life because you were embarrassed by honest work. I can change, she cried. Can you? Or will you just pretend to change until you get what you want? I can really change. Prove it. How? Start by answering one question honestly. If I were still just a construction foreman, no billions, no empire, no Forbes ranking, would you want me in your life? Emma hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I thought so. I started walking toward my truck again. Dad, wait. Let me try again. Ask me again. I stopped. Emma, it doesn't matter what you say now. What matters is what you've already shown me for 5 years. People can change. Yes, they can. But change has to come from inside, not from desperation. I reached my truck and turned around one final time. Emma was still standing by the pillar, looking utterly lost. Emma, I love you. I always will. But love isn't the same as acceptance. I won't accept being treated as less than human because of my job. It wasn't about your job. It was entirely about my job and my clothes and my truck and my house. Everything that made me embarrassing in your new social circle. I opened the truck door. When you figure out how to love people for who they are instead of what they have, call me. Until then, we have nothing to discuss. Dad, goodbye. I drove away, leaving my daughter standing alone in the parking garage, finally understanding the brutal difference between wealth and worth. The engagement party continued above us, but for Emma, it was truly over. By Wednesday, she'd learned exactly how much her inheritance was worth compared to the relationship she'd thrown away. Monday morning arrived, gray and cold. I sat in Margaret Davis's conference room, looking out at downtown Los Angeles through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city I'd helped build spread out below us. Highways, bridges, office towers. Most people driving to work that morning had no idea that Wilson Construction Group had built the infrastructure they relied on every day. Margaret entered, carrying a stack of documents and wearing the expression of someone who'd spent the weekend dealing with frantic phone calls. Jake, before we begin, I should mention that Emma called me 17 times yesterday. What did she want? To negotiate? To apologize? To explain? To beg? Margaret sat down across from me. I told her the decision was out of my hands now. Is it completely? The Inheritance Committee convened at 9 a.m. 3 attorneys, 2 family advisors, 1 independent mediator. They reviewed all the documentation. Margaret opened the top file. Text messages where Emma called you just a construction worker to her friends. Photos from events where she introduced you as hired help. Audio recordings from your country club conversation. And of course, Saturday night's public performance. What did they conclude? Unanimous violation of inheritance terms. Complete forfeiture of all funds and assets. She slid a document across the table. This is the official notice. Emma has 72 hours from this morning to return all assets purchased with inheritance money. The penthouse, the car, the jewelry, the country club membership, everything. I scanned the legal language. It was thorough. And it was final. What about the $5 million in cash she already spent? She'll need to repay it. If she can't, we'll pursue legal collection. And if she still can't, bankruptcy, wage garnishment, standard debt collection procedures. Margaret pulled out another document. This is the asset transfer form. Once you sign it, the $33 million reverts to you as the surviving family member. I looked at the paper, but didn't pick up the pen. Jake, is there a problem? What happens to the money if I don't sign? It goes into a charitable trust managed by the estate. Elizabeth Morrison specified that if inheritance conditions weren't met and the family declined to reclaim the funds, everything should go to children's charities. I thought about Emma at 5 years old, excited about career day until kids made fun of my work clothes. I thought about teaching her to tie her shoes, helping with homework, walking her down the aisle at her wedding. I thought about Saturday night, watching her choose social status over basic human decency. I won't be taking the money. Margaret looked genuinely surprised. Are you sure? It's $33 million. I'm sure. Let it go to the children's charities. That's what Elizabeth would have wanted. Jake, you're giving up. I'm not giving up anything. I'm making a choice based on principle. Margaret made a note in the file. Very well. The charitable trust will be established by Friday. She pulled out a final document. This is a restraining order application. Given Emma's persistent phone calls, I thought you might want legal protection from harassment. No restraining order. Jake, she's called my office 43 times since Saturday night. She's still my daughter. If she wants to contact me, she can. Whether I respond is my choice. Margaret gathered the documents. The committee asked me to commend you for your handling of the situation. It would have been easy to use your wealth to intimidate Emma into compliance. Instead, you let the inheritance terms speak for themselves. The terms were fair, Margaret. Emma chose to ignore them. What will you tell people about this? The business community is already buzzing about Saturday night. I'll tell them the truth. My daughter lost her inheritance because she forgot that respect is earned, not bought. Margaret stood to walk me out. Jake, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Do you think Emma will learn from this? I thought about the question as we walked to the elevator. I hope so. But learning requires accepting responsibility. Emma spent Saturday night blaming everyone except herself. The elevator doors opened. If she does learn, will you forgive her? I've already forgiven her. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the last 5 years didn't happen. What would it take for you to rebuild the relationship? An apology that isn't motivated by money. Recognition that her behavior was wrong, not just inconvenient. And evidence that she understands the difference between wealth and character. The elevator reached the ground floor. Margaret walked me to the lobby. Jake, one last question. Any regrets about not telling Emma about your wealth earlier? I stepped into the Los Angeles morning, the crisp air clearing my head, thinking about all the ways the story could have played out differently. None, I said firmly. If I'd told her about the money, I never would have learned who she really was. And now you know. Now I know she has a choice to make. She can either figure out how to be proud of herself without putting other people down. Or she can spend the rest of her life blaming other people for her problems. Which do you think she'll choose? I got into my truck, rolled down the window, and looked back at the imposing building where my daughter's inheritance had just become 43 charitable scholarships for underprivileged kids. I guess we'll find out. By Wednesday afternoon, the consequences were real and immediate. Emma's Bentley was repossessed at 11 a.m. while she was having lunch with Caroline Ashworth. The repo company waited politely outside the Beverly Hills restaurant until she finished her salad, then handed her the paperwork in front of a dozen of Beverly Hills' most influential women. Caroline Ashworth called me that evening. Jake, or should I say Mr. Wilson, I owe you an apology. No, you don't. Yes, I do. Richard and I judged you based on appearances. We were wrong. You judged me based on information Emma provided. That's not your fault. Still, we should have been more thoughtful. I could hear the calculation in her voice. Caroline Ashworth was smart enough to realize that insulting a billionaire's work clothes might not have been her wisest social move. Caroline, you don't need to apologize. You reacted honestly to what you saw. Well, if you're ever interested in supporting children's charities, Richard and I would love to discuss opportunities with Wilson Construction. I'll keep that in mind. What Caroline didn't know was that Wilson Construction had been anonymously funding 3 of her charity boards for the past decade. I saw no reason to mention it. Thursday morning brought more consequences. Emma's country club membership was terminated for non-payment. The Beverly Hills penthouse went into foreclosure proceedings. Her credit cards were canceled when the banks discovered her inheritance had been revoked. Bradley Sterling called me Friday afternoon. Mr. Williams. Mr. Wilson, I think we need to talk. About what? About Emma. About what happened Saturday night. What about it? I need to understand. Is Emma really going to lose everything? She's already lost everything, Bradley. The question is what she plans to do about it. She's been staying with friends since Tuesday. She can't afford her own place anymore. I'm aware. Mr. Wilson, I know Emma said some terrible things to you, but she's panicking. She doesn't know how to live without money. Then she'll learn. Is there anything? I mean, could you help her? Just enough to get back on her feet. Why would I do that? Because she's your daughter. I thought about that for a moment. Bradley, let me ask you something. If she was just a normal person, working a normal job, would you still want to marry her? The silence stretched longer than it should have. I love Emma. That's not what I asked. More silence. I see. Bradley, I think you and Emma both need to figure out what you actually value in relationships. Mr. Wilson, good luck, Bradley. I hung up. By Monday, the engagement was off. The most interesting call came from Harrison Parker. Jake, I wanted to apologize for outing you Saturday night. That wasn't my place. You did what you thought was right. Still, I know you kept your identity private for good reasons. I did, but Emma forced the situation. How are you handling the publicity? I saw the article in the Business Journal this morning. I hadn't seen the article yet. What did it say? Construction billionaire's daughter loses inheritance after public family feud. They got most of the facts right, surprisingly. Any comment from Emma? She declined to be interviewed. Smart move, considering. Harrison paused. Jake, I've been thinking about what happened. Your daughter spent years being embarrassed by honest work, then lost millions because she couldn't show basic respect. There's a lesson there. What lesson is that? Character matters more than circumstances. Always has, always will. The biggest consequence came the following week. Emma showed up at my house. I found her sitting on my front porch Tuesday evening when I got home from work. She looked different, smaller somehow. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of designer clothes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Hi, Dad. Emma, can we talk? I sat down on the porch steps beside her. What do you want to say? I want to apologize. For what, specifically? For treating you like you were worthless. For being ashamed of honest work. For caring more about what other people thought than about the man who raised me. I listened without interrupting, the evening air cool around us. I want to apologize for Saturday night, for the things I said in front of all those people, for choosing my pride over our relationship. She was crying now, but quietly. I want to apologize for 5 years of being a terrible daughter. And I want to apologize for not knowing you at all. For never asking about your work, your dreams, your accomplishments. For assuming that because you didn't show off, you didn't have anything to show. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And I want to apologize for only caring about your feelings after I found out about your money. We sat in silence for a few minutes. What are you going to do now? I asked, my voice soft. I don't know. I've never had to figure out how to live without money. What do you want to do? I want to learn how to be someone I can respect. I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her for the first time in years. That's a good start. 6 months later, Emma called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Dad, I got a job. What kind of job? Administrative assistant at a nonprofit. It's entry level, but they help underprivileged kids get college scholarships. How do you feel about it? Scared. Hopeful. Grateful someone was willing to hire me despite everything. Emma had spent the winter learning how to live on a budget. She shared a small apartment with a roommate in Burbank. She took the bus to work. She cooked her own meals and shopped at thrift stores. Dad, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I'll ever stop feeling ashamed of how I treated you? I hope not. Really, Emma? Shame can be useful if it motivates you to be better. The question is whether you'll use it as fuel for growth or as an excuse for self-pity. I'm trying to use it for growth. I can see that. She'd been volunteering at a homeless shelter on weekends. She'd written letters to the people she'd hurt, taking responsibility without asking for forgiveness. She started seeing a therapist to understand why she'd needed other people's money to feel valuable. Dad, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but do you think we could have dinner sometime? Just us. I thought about the little girl who used to help me fix things around the house. The teenager who called me every day during her first semester of college. The young woman who'd cried on my shoulder when her first serious relationship ended. I thought about the person she'd become when money made her forget where she came from. And I thought about the person she might become if she learned from her mistakes instead of repeating them. I'd like that, I said, a flicker of genuine hope igniting in my chest. Really? Really? But Emma, I need you to understand something. What? I'm not the same person I was before Saturday night. And you're not the same person either. We're going to have to figure out what our relationship looks like now. I understand. Do you? I think so. You're not going to pretend the last 5 years didn't happen just because I'm sorry. That's right. And I'm not going to pretend I deserve forgiveness just because I apologized. Also right. We made plans for dinner the following Friday. Nothing fancy, just a chance to see if we could build something new from the pieces of what we'd broken. As I hung up the phone, I realized something important. For the first time in years, I was proud of my daughter. Not for what she had, but for who she was finally becoming. It was a tough lesson, one that cost her everything, but sometimes that's what it takes for us to truly see ourselves. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have let the truth shatter everything? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts.